Hey, good morning. Welcome to another incredible week. It is Monday, and this week matters. I want to remind you that this week matters. So success is nothing more than a progression of successful day after day after day after day, which turns into weeks and then months and then years. And so it's very easy to say, oh, it's just another week, but this week matters for building the lives and the careers that we want. So in this video, what we're going to break down is I'm going to share with you a philosophy that applies to your personal life, your professional career, as well as your finances. And it's a philosophy that when I learned it, and think of it as a principle, how you apply this principle to the different parts of your life will massively change the trajectory of your life and how you think about things. So I want to share with you this principle that'll affect how you perceive, how you think through, and ultimately how you make decisions in every area of your life. Now, this is a principle that many people either they don't figure out or they don't learn it, or if they do learn it, they don't apply it until much later on in their life and career. And unfortunately, they look back and say, boy, did that cost me a lot. How much has that cost me in terms of my personal happiness, my financial wealth, my career success? So what we want to do, and we all know this is the best time to learn something and apply it, is 5 to 25 years ago, and the next best time is today. So let's get to it. All right, now before we actually dive straight into the philosophy and the principle that I want to share with you, we first need to understand the context in which that we actually apply that. How do we think about applying it? So what I want to start with is an idea that is who you are today, who I am today, who we all are today. We're nothing more than a giant aggregate sum total of all of our past decisions and all of our past experiences in our lives. So what we have financially, what we have in terms of relationships, in terms of who we are, personal characteristics and qualities, everything in our lives right now, we are responsible for. And it's a giant sum total of everything that we've ever had or ever experienced or ever decided. So everybody experiences luck. Everybody experiences tragedy. But what's important is not the luck or the tragedy themselves. What's important is the frequency at which someone experiences luck or someone experiences tragedy. Now, we've all heard kind of one's a dot, two's a line, and all of a sudden three is a trend. And the important thing I want to share with you now is we have billions of dots to connect. Not just three and not just one or two. We have billions of dots. So how we can think about our life is think of, we start here, we end here, as far as we know. And everything in between is a line. Now, that line is not solid. And if you were to zoom in on the line, you're going to see giant clumps of dots. Now, those clumps of dots, they all look different. And if you keep zooming in, and eventually you get down to the micro dots that are forming these clumps, so our life is just these giant clumps of dots all the way through. And then even further, if you zoom in, they're all individual dots. Now, how we can think about those dots in our entire life, all of those dots represent a decision and a resulting experience from the decision. And when we take a step back, if we know that all these these billions of dots in our lives, those are all decisions and experiences, well then if we zoom out and we look at the clumps show patterns or trends or habits. They allow us to start to predict, not only predict, we can better understand how did we get to where we are today, but then also you can start to predict, okay, if this is the pattern, if this is the trend, how is the rest of my life going to look? And it's through that trend, that pattern, that habit analysis that we can actually start to understand why does someone frequently appear to be lucky, and yet at the same time, why do so many other people frequently experience tragedy or unhappiness or failure, or they don't get what they want? And it's not about the one specific thing. It's about the overall trend. What does a week look like? What does a month look like? What are all of the decisions made within that time period, and how are they made? How did those decisions affect the actions thereafter? And how long did those actions progress? If you do, let's say that a decision is to work out. All right, well, if you work out once, well, the resulting experience is you made a decision, I'm going to work out, and the experience is I did one workout. Well, that's one dot, and that's not going to predict a trend. It's not going to form a pattern or a habit. And so when we think about if someone truly does experience, one-off luck, God's grace, and then someone also experiences a one-off tragedy, seemingly totally unfair, unexpected, and it's a tail end event, a black swan. Well, that's in stats, that's an outlier. So if that were their line, that one dot is up here or down here. It's not actually statistically relevant. You wouldn't consider that as, oh, well, that happened, so I'm going to project this person's life to look like that. Or this happened to me, so now that determines the rest of my life. If it's an outlier, we shouldn't even pay attention to it. We should appreciate it if it's lucky, and we should learn from it and disregard and prepare for others if it's a tragedy. But overall, we need to focus on the core trends, the patterns within our dots, which are our decisions and our experiences. All right, now to quickly summarize again, because I really want you to be able to see and think about and perceive your life in this way, is, all right, so we have the beginning and the end of our lives, and all of the dots in between, both kind of forecasted dots here and then our actual past experiences there. We have billions of dots in our lives. Now, those dots all represent decisions and resulting experiences and actions after the decisions. And the clumps of dots or time periods of dots form trends or patterns or habits. And we can, in the past, we can look back and analyze them and think about them and say, okay, that's how I got to where I am today. I'm a giant sum total of everything, of all these patterns and trends and habits from the past. But then I actually have the ability to change my life going forward, to change my life, my career, my finances, whatever it is that you want to change, we can, because we have the ability to affect the dots going forward. So in order to change our life and our career, we need to change the clumps going forward. But in order to change the clumps, we need to start with the individual dots, the billions of dots that we still have left going forward. So that's what the core principle and the philosophy that I'm going to share with you is, how do we make those decisions and the resulting actions? The individual dots themselves that we need to pile on one after the other after the other. Every single day we make probably 10 to 100 plus decisions. And those decisions are going to lead to actions and experiences. And that determines whether or not we had a successful day. And if we have a successful day, well, if we have a second successful day, and then a third, and then a fourth, a fifth, and then a month, and then a week, or a week, a month, a year, and then a decade, and we just keep going, that is how we can do whatever we want in our lives and our careers. But it all starts with literally the individual days, and within those days, the specific decisions and actions that we choose to take. So now we can dive straight into the philosophy and the core principle for this video, now that we have the context, which are the dots, the timeline, etc. Now, the first part is we need to break down those dots. So every single dot, I believe, can be broken down into 4 separate parts. So you have the dot, and then it blows out into these 4, and we have decision, outcome, sacrifices, and return on investment. Now, whenever we make a decision, and many people have heard this, decide is to cut off. So when we make a decision, which is the first part of the dot, that then leads to an outcome or a result. Now, that's the second part of the dot. But the third part is when we make a decision, we get this outcome, we've also simultaneously decided or cut it against or sacrificed all other potential outcomes. And so the fourth part, return on investment, is weighing and determining the outcome that we chose relative to all of the sacrificed outcomes. Now, what is most important is most people live their life and their careers and their finances based on what they get. And they haven't taken into account or strongly considered, what are they sacrificing? What are all the potential variables and outcomes that they've sacrificed? And so the core principle philosophy, what I want to share with you is make life decisions based on what you're willing to sacrifice. Don't make life decisions, career decisions, everything based on what you're going to get. Of course, you want to plan, but in terms of the day-to-day decisions, the actions, how do I think about what I decide and what I actually do? We want to make those decisions based on what we're willing to sacrifice. And when we do that, it will massively affect your personal life, your professional career, and your financial wealth. All right, now I know what you're probably thinking. You're probably thinking, wow, cool theory, bro. How does that actually apply to my life and career and my finances? So that's what I've written down, several examples I want to share with you so that you can start to think about how does this principle of make life decisions based on what we're willing to sacrifice, how does that actually apply to your life? So starting with personal life. So the first one I have is intimate and loving relationships. So think of this as someone that, your intimate partner, the person that you love, or also family. What are you willing to do for those relationships? What are you willing to sacrifice and give to the relationship to make sure it's healthy and loving and it's everything that you want, both what you want and what they want? And then the second is friendships. So what are you willing to sacrifice for certain friends? And we all have scenarios where, a certain friend needs help, and maybe their ego or their pride, or maybe they just don't feel comfortable asking for help. It's as the friend, we're the one that needs to be willing to sacrifice, to give to that relationship and strengthen it. And then the next one is other people and strangers. And this is super important. How we treat other people is extremely telling of who we are as an individual, of our character. Do you hold the door for other people? Do you say please? Do you say thank you? Do you respect someone's boundaries? Do you acknowledge other people? And so how we treat other people and what we're willing to sacrifice for other people and strangers, people that we don't know, is massively telling of who we are. Fulfillment and happiness. So what are we willing to sacrifice in terms of time, effort, energy, money? What are we willing to sacrifice in order to be fulfilled and be happy in our lives, however we define that? And then health and longevity. And this is a really important one. What are we willing to sacrifice in order to make sure that we have health, we're strong, we're able-bodied, we're able-minded, and we're able to be around? We have the longevity. We can be there for our great grandkids because I took care of my body, my mind, and my soul. It takes sacrifice to do that. And then finally is our personal dreams. So everyone has different personal dreams where they see themselves 10, 20, 30 years. What are we willing to sacrifice in order to make sure that happens? All right, now the second category is professional experiences, or our professional careers, that side of our life. So then we have our value as a professional. What are you willing to sacrifice in order to consistently improve and become more valuable as a professional in the marketplace? And then we have career opportunities. So many people live their whole lives and careers waiting for opportunities to come to them. The question that I would pose to you is, what are you willing to sacrifice in order to create those opportunities for yourself? And once you've created them, what are you willing to sacrifice to seize them? So then we have advancement, career advancement, and visibility. What are you willing to sacrifice in order to consistently advance your career and be visible and be able to demonstrate and prove your value to the people who need to see it? And then our dream career. What are you willing to sacrifice in order to build the long-term, both the short-term and the long-term dream career that you want, that you desire? And I like to think of these grand visions, think of them as skyscrapers. In order to build a skyscraper, you need to have a very strong foundation. But then in order to build a skyscraper, you need to have a vision of it. You need to have a blueprint, and then you need to consistently put, floor by floor by floor. You build that thing step by step by step. And that's exactly what our lives are. So what are we willing to sacrifice to build that skyscraper of our lives? All right, so now the third area of our life, our financial part of our life, some examples are our knowledge and understanding of personal finances. So what are we willing to sacrifice to make sure that we understand how we're earning money? How do we make more money? What are we doing with that money? How are we applying it? And then consistently, how are we building it? Putting a plan in place for our personal finances. What are we willing to sacrifice to do that? And then wealth building and financial freedom. So what are we willing to sacrifice to make sure that we have a long-term plan in place that we adhere to, we stick to it? So eventually we'll hit a point later on down the road where we're able to live off the cash flow being generated from our own resources, which eventually allows us to be financially free. Now, third example for finances, peace of mind and security. And I have two good examples here, but what are we willing to sacrifice to make sure that we have peace of mind and security, that our personal finances are doing what we want them to do? Now, one example is sometimes people use their money in ways that it's outside of their comfort zone. And if this investment or if this idea goes wrong, they've lost money that they can't afford to lose. Well, are you willing to sacrifice that potential high risk, high reward opportunity in order to make sure that your long-term plan is in place. And that is super, super important. An example, Warren Buffett, his rule number one for finances is don't lose money. And a second rule is see rule number one. And so just recently we saw the craziness that was going on in the markets, everyone piling in to GameStop and AMC and BlackBerry and these other stocks. And the thing is a lot of people sacrificed their long-term plan in order to greedily try to capitalize on this high risk, high return opportunity without really doing any analysis or any research on their own or any fundamental understanding of the personal finances and the risk versus reward, the outcome versus the sacrifices. So when we think about our personal finances, is what am I willing to sacrifice? Am I willing to sacrifice high risk, high reward opportunities to make sure that my long-term plan's in place? That is crucial. We cannot afford to lose money that we have construction capital, and that construction capital, we cannot lose it, because that's what's going to build over time to eventually get us to where we need to be. So Warren Buffett's not wrong when he's like, we cannot afford to lose money. See rule number one as rule number two. All right, that was a little bit of a sidebar, but I'm going to keep that in there. All right, so another example, financial future and being able to fund our life and career. So what are we willing to sacrifice to make sure that we can actually fund this plan? And then finally is another example is weddings, vacations, education, our kids' educations, houses, cars, really anything that's going to require a large amount of money or a large down payment, anything like that is what are we willing to sacrifice in order to make sure that later on down the road, we can truly have these things. So I know I've said that probably 100 times in this video now, but what are we willing to sacrifice in order to make sure that we get what we want? Most people know what they want, but they haven't truly considered what am I willing to sacrifice in order to get it. Okay, so we've talked about now the principle and the philosophy, and the final thing I want to share with you is thinking about why do most people not have what they want for their lives, their careers, or their finances? And now that we know this principle and this philosophy, we can begin to understand those decisions, how they make decisions in their everyday life. It's because they're making decisions based on what they want or based on, what they get, the outcome, as opposed to the sacrifices, they always, or most people, choose short-term gratification instead of and sacrifice long-term fulfillment. And that leads to one last question that I've asked a million times, and I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of it now, but why? Why do so many people, and myself included in the past, why did I consistently choose, and why do so many people choose short-term gratification instead of what they actually want? Long-term projects, long-term dreams, long-term fulfillment. And it's at the end of the day, it comes down to when we don't know what this is, when we don't know what the sacrifices is, when someone doesn't know what their long-term dreams are, their career goals, their financial goals, when they don't have a very clean, clear, defined vision that they're committed to, when they make these decisions, they feel like they're sacrificing nothing. There's nothing there to sacrifice because they don't know what that is. So of course they're going to choose the short-term pleasure over the long-term fulfillment because they're not sacrificing anything. They feel like they're not sacrificing anything. So my final thing to leave with you is, and this is the application for the week, think and ask yourself the question, what am I willing to sacrifice for what I want? What am I willing to sacrifice for what I want for my life, my career, and my financial future? Thanks, and I'll see you next week. I hope you found this video helpful and well worth your time, and I would encourage you to do two things. If you haven't already, click subscribe and click the little bell on YouTube so that you'll be notified when I do send this content out every single week. And again, my mission is to help you advance your life and career, grow professionally, and make more money. And I can only do that if I can send you this content. So that's first thing. And then the second thing is, if you have been thinking about making a big life and career change and you're wondering what would that process look like? How would I even begin thinking about that? What would all the different steps be? On my website, redstonecoaching.com, I've created a completely free set of videos. So there's 3 videos for free. All you have to do is sign up. And then those 3 videos, I'll walk you through the 3-step process, which is foundation, transition, and acceleration for making a big change in your life and career. And I think that would give you a lot of clarity into what would that look like for me. So thanks so much for your time investment. I hope it was a healthy return on your investment for this video. Keep crushing, keep moving forward. Success equals progress, not outcome. And I'll see you in the next video.